Good afternoon. Together with my colleagues in the Museum Studies program, my Associate Director, Deirdre Hanneberry, and our Administrative Assistant, Amy Smola, it's my pleasure to greet you and to welcome our speaker. My name is Ricky Ponsalan. I'm the Director of the Museum Studies program. Before I introduce our speaker, let me begin with a land acknowledgement. The University of Michigan occupies the ancestral, traditional, and current lands of the Anishinaabe, or people of the Three Fires, namely Ojibwe, Odawa, and Bodewadamin nations. These nations were forced to cede their lands in 1817 through the coercive Treaty of the Foot of the Rapids. The treaty earmarked half of the lands for a college at Detroit, where indigenous students would be able to receive an education. Despite this commitment, the university did not enroll an indigenous student until 130 years later. And as of this year, indigenous students represent 0.16%, about 82 students of UM's population. Additionally, it is the sale of this land that established UM's endowment and helped create and sustain UM as a premier research university. As we continue to occupy this land, we recognize that this acknowledgement does not substitute for the creation of an authentic and sustained relationship with the indigenous communities and their lands that we occupy. Further, this acknowledgement will not erase the harm and violence that have been done to indigenous people through the actions and inactions of our institutions. However, through a land acknowledgement, we are taking an important small step towards the creation of an equitable, sustainable, and self-determined future. In offering this land acknowledgement, we recognize and affirm indigenous people and communities who live here now and those who were forcibly removed from their homelands. We also affirm indigenous histories and experiences and the historic and ongoing struggles for indigenous sovereignty. Since 2007, the Museum Studies program has hosted a visiting scholar, a leading museum practitioner or researcher who spends a week on our campus interacting with our students, faculty, and the local and regional museum community. While at UM, the visiting scholar teaches a session of our Graduate Pro Seminar, meets with student teams to discuss their capstone projects, and schedules one-on-one meetings with interested students and faculty. The visiting scholar also presents an evening public lecture, which is happening this evening, and leads a morning workshop of students, faculty, and local museum professionals. Often, one day of the visit is devoted to visiting regional and campus museums and conversations with a broad array of local museum professionals. Okay, sorry. The MSc Visiting Scholar Program brings internationally renowned museum practitioners and innovative thinkers. Their presence serves as galvanizing force among the local museum communities on topics of shared interest, assures challenging and exciting discussions in our pro seminar, offers expert professional support to our student work, and allows for exciting one-on-one interactions with students, faculty, and museum professionals. The Museum Studies program is grateful to the following units on campus for their co-sponsorship for our winter 2026 Visiting Scholar Residency, the History of Art Department, and the Arts Initiative. I'd like to give the UM Museum of Art, UMA, a special shout out, particularly its director, Dr. Tina Olsen, for introducing our speaker this afternoon. This happened over coffee, so it's really dangerous to have coffee with Tina because wonderful things happen. Dangerous in a good way. And also, UMA was instrumental in building a Victoria's itinerary for her visit, and they've taken on a lot of work and responsibility in introducing Tina to our colleagues in the museums. Victoria, I'm sorry. Victoria is an impressive curator and has accomplished a lot. You can read her full bio in our website. In the interest of time, I will not read the entirety of her bio, but I'll read the condensed version. Victoria Noorthoorn is the director of the Museo de Arte Moderno de Buenos Aires since 2013. She holds a licentiate in art history from the University of Buenos Aires and an MA in curatorial studies from the Center for Curatorial Studies at Bard College in New York. She is highly visible in the world of art museums with her extensive international curatorial and exhibition experience, which includes curating the Bienales in Pontevedra, Spain, Mercosur in Brazil, and Lyon, France. During her tenure leading the Museo Moderno, the museum has undergone a deep process of development that has involved doubling its exhibition spaces, presenting over 120 exhibitions, publishing over 70 bilingual publications, escalating its education programs to involve over 20,000 teachers a year, and achieving recognition for its mental health and accessibility programs. In 2020 to 2025, Noorthoorn was an active board member of CIMAM, the International Committee of Museums and Collections of Modern Art, which is affiliated with the International Council of Museums, or ICOM. Victoria's talk is titled Museo Moderno, a values-driven model that positions art and artists as central to human, economic, and democratic development. After her talk, we will be taking questions from the audience. This will be moderated by the director of UMA, Dr. Tina Olsen. Everyone, please welcome our visiting scholar, Victoria Noorthoorn.
Thank you, Ricky. Good afternoon, good evening. I'm very, very happy to be here today. I want to extend a very warm expression of gratitude to Dr. Tina Olsen, director of UMA, who had the idea of bringing me here, and it was a real pleasure to welcome her in Buenos Aires. You transformed our team and created an exhilarating enthusiasm for UMA in Buenos Aires. So thank you very much for taking on this wonderful initiative. And I want to thank very, very especially Ricky Ponzalan and Deirdre Hannebury, director and assistant director respectively of the Graduate Museum Studies program here at the University of Michigan, and Amy Smola, who have done so much in order for me to be able to be here. So thank you very, very much. Also, thank you for your presence here tonight and for your interest. I wanted to dedicate this lecture to a very dear friend of mine, J. A. Levinson, who until only a few days ago, he was the director of the international program at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and who, when I was only 28 years old, gave me the opportunity of my first museum position working for him. He passed away only a few days ago, and I want to dedicate this lecture to him, because if it weren't for Jay, I wouldn't be here after a long career in museum practices. So thank you for this opportunity. So, let's see. So I have developed a lecture entitled A Values-Driven Model That Positions Art and Artists as Central to Human, Economic, and Democratic Development. It has 4 sections. The first is a bit extensive. I will read it. As you might imagine, English is not my first language, and for the sake of precision, I will read. And the 3 following sections, I will develop more spontaneously following the images. How does art lead the way in creating our possible futures? How do the human imagination and the agency and actions of art free the potential for wonder, for hope, optimism and joy, to confront times of agony, trauma and fear? In what ways do artists of all disciplines from around the world dare still to dream of different alternative futures for humanity, to envision previously unimagined paths forward? How does art furnish humanity with the means to mourn, mitigate, overcome and bring solace and healing to the world's deep antagonisms and conflicts? How to offer the future generations the hope, the thrill, that a more harmonious and peaceful earth can prevail? How to awaken a sense of wonder that art has the daring, the wit and courage to delve into the question of what it means to be human, creative and imaginative? Can we imagine a museum that touches the soul, that aches and feels and celebrates the vitality and power of art in its profound capacity to reveal and to dream, while still upholding the values of research, sincerity, and beauty? These are some of the questions that drive my work as I lead the Museo de Arte Moderno de Buenos Aires, or Museo Moderno, a public museum dependent on the Ministry of Culture of the city of Buenos Aires, now for more than 12 years. I persistently remind myself of two fundamental human strengths: our capacity to engage in dialogue and our capacity to imagine. Also, of the responsibility involved in leading a public museum for Argentina and the world at large, and specifically of the need to understand this role holistically as a constellation of micropolitics that embraces the possibility of radical change. A set of micropolitics that aims to inspire alternative, novel, healthier, and more diverse systems of macropolitics to bring about environmentally responsible, equitable, and ethical futures. In so doing, I seek to affirm the power of creativity as I endorse a radically optimistic vision of the role of the arts, including design, fashion, architecture, science, ecology, and education in shaping humanity's possible futures. These ambitions, however, require a first step, a primary condition, the recognition that to remain relevant, we must show the world that we are ready to fully embrace the values of equity and freedom of expression. To do this, we must work through the diverse crises that have shaped our history, our past, and even our present. Today, as probably never before, museums are being subjected to strict modes of control and even censorship. Many artists and art institutions around the world are losing faith in their possibilities to express themselves in freedom and security and to delve in open discussions. We must then acknowledge that it is not only the right to freedom of expression that is under threat, but the continued existence of art institutions as we have known them throughout the last century. All of which leads to the broader question of whether civil society, its leaders and its voices are still able to understand and tolerate the way artists think and art works. Is artistic expression possible in what we have so far understood to be open and democratic societies? This is the question that all museums and cultural institutions must address, challenge, and seek to answer in the affirmative. The second condition is the understanding of the urgency to reposition the role of the artist in society as a major agent for radical change, capable of asking the relevant moral and ethical questions around the realities we live through, of making the power of creation and the human imagination real and material through works and actions, and of designing and transforming the futures that we humans are able to envision and enact for humanity and for the planet. We, as museum leaders and policy makers, have the obligation to work and support artists and intellectuals from all disciplines who trust in the power of art. By this, I mean artists who do not place art at the service of politics or activism, but for whom rather art can be politics and activism, and art can be as well subtlety, nuance, whisper, beauty, tension, friction, horror. They are artists who find in art the possibility of seeing reality anew, elaborating new perspectives, solutions, paths, and initiatives to trigger debate in the public realm. Artists who understand their work and actions in direct relationship with the planet, with nature and the living and material ecosystems on Earth, and with each other as part of an artistic community and interwoven societies that are ultimately one. In this regard, it is key to consider, where does the artist speak from? From which position in the world does he or she establish their position of enunciation? And here it is important for me to establish, as is logical, that Museo Moderno is a museum from the South that embodies a truly Southern perspective, which is the perspective that I embody as an individual and as a professional, and that I live and work by, a perspective that is based on the conviction of the fundamental equality of different traditions. In order to become operational in the actual design of a show or an institution, this perspective must have been lived and worked through over a lifetime and in one's day-to-day career. It is not a mask to be donned for a given exhibition only to switch back to one's real face afterwards. When authentic, such a perspective can afford to be ruthless towards its own art and artists. It will not be hoodwinked by the desire to redeem or redress, by political correctness or guilt, or blackmailed by invocations of its complicity in the colonial past, including bad art because of its supposed authenticity or political import. At this juncture, and here in Michigan, in the context of a museum studies program that is proudly global, it is probably relevant to mention that Western European and North American art histories have tended to presuppose their own centrality or superiority and see the art of other regions as an enriching addition or welcome contribution. The use of the apparently benign word inclusion, in particular, somewhat unsettlingly suggests that the European North American canon awards itself the right to decide which artworks from beyond should or should not be let I will go again. The use of the apparently benign word inclusion, in particular, somewhat unsettlingly suggests that the European North American canon awards itself the right to decide which artworks from beyond should or should not be let in on their own merit or contribution. Such notions are easy to consciously reject and verbally contest, but extremely difficult to extricate from actual curatorial practice. What is generally almost universally absent is a canonical voice willing to acknowledge on equal terms what is produced elsewhere. From our point of view, there are no major or minor artistic movements. There are only powerful artistic currents that at times run parallel and at other times crossed or joined. Such currents are independent in their identities and interactions with their diverse realities, but interdependent in their collaborations, conversations, and debates. In this view of art history, Latin American art or African art are not here to complete or complement nor tick the box of difference, but to shape an art both global and diverse, combative and democratic, that is in a fraternal equality that does not preclude rivalry and that contributes to show the vitality and force of art the world over. In this regard, at Museo Moderno, we have presented back in 2018 the inaugural exhibition of our expanded and refurbished galleries, A Tale of Two Worlds, that presented a dialogue between the works from our museum's collections and from many Latin American collections, in dialogue with a collection of the Museum of Modern Art in Frankfurt, with the aim of showing the pioneering work of our southern artists who in many cases anticipated northern artistic movements. But all in all, Museo Moderno has, during the past decade, presented around 100 exhibitions of Argentinian artists of all generations, exhibitions that we have developed to the highest standards for our public at large, when used to consume culture. We are located in the city with the largest proportion of bookshops per citizens in the world, yet one that simultaneously undergoes backlashes as we navigate a fragile economy that in 2023 presented an annual inflation of over 200%, and that today still presents notable inflation levels in the order of 25% in 2025. We exist to serve a public that needs solace. And the great news is that we, in alliance with art and artists, may deliver. Okay, so that is my introduction. And now I will go on to describing how this is put into action. On a first note, I wanted to show you showcase which are our main institutional values. I have talked about the centrality of art and artists and of the importance of freedom of expression, creativity, and the need to invest in experimental art production. And in what follows, I will delve into probably the other aspects of this list of values that includes research and respect for history, the importance of education in art and education, equity and inclusion I have mentioned, and specifically promoting art access and accessibility and thinking about our planet, which we like to think of as the future. There are three sections that I wish to develop tonight. How we think of art and artists as fostering human, economic, and democratic development. And I'm going to start with the importance of art as an enabler to the understanding of our past and present. As you know, Argentina is a country that has gone an important military dictatorship between 1976 and 1983, And one of the most prominent artists responding to that context at the time was Leon Ferrari, the late Leon Ferrari. This is a wonderful work acquired by the founding director of our museum. It's called Hombre, the man, the sculpture. And Leon Ferrari created sculptures. He's a very prolific artist. And he created beautiful abstract drawings. I would like to read you just a few quotes from him. And these are the only quotes I will read because I know we have a lot to share tonight. He would say of these abstract works, "I draw words that say things, manuscripts whose traces are reminiscent of voices. The shape of the writing, the way the words are drawn, is part of their meaning, just like the tone of voice when they are pronounced. Drawings to relate thoughts and images that the words cannot say." So Leon would create these drawings conscious of the impossibility to express a very painful, an extremely painful reality. What happens when there are no more words to express a given reality, a given human experience or horror? And I think it is perhaps timely to share with you a reply that Leon Ferrari published in a newspaper in 1965 to criticize the war in Vietnam at the time. "I believe that our civilization is achieving the most refined degree of savagery ever recorded in history. It seems to me that for the first time in history, all the conditions necessary for savagery are present. The richest and most powerful country has invaded one of the least developed ones. It tortures its inhabitants, it photographs that torture, it publishes the torture in its newspapers, and nobody says a word. Hitler had enough sense of shame to conceal his torture. Johnson has gone further, he puts it on display. The difference between them reflects the differences in the degree of responsibility of the people. Germans can say that they didn't know what was going on in Hitler's concentration camps, but we civilized Christians cannot say that. We see the faces of the tortured every day in our newspapers, the same newspapers that speak to us of liberty and the rights of man, but to whom it doesn't occur to say that one of the most fundamental rights of man is not to be tortured, and that if someone is aware that torture is happening and there is no more informative document of this fact than that the photographs taken and published by the torturer, they should at the very least offer a verbal condemnation. But we civilized people accept everything our newspapers decide should be accepted, everything that is packaged attractively. That is how photographs of the worst crimes of humanity have become just another technologically produced object, another object to be traded. The photographs are not published as a condemnation, as a criticism. They are published because they increase the newspaper or magazine's sales, like the photographs published in sensationalist tabloids, lurid crime news. These photographs and the passivity of the Western peoples are signs of our advanced savagery. Another symbol of savagery is a reaction of the art reporter who, when they find these same photos stuck into a box with caustically corrosive critical intent, it doesn't occur to them to condemn the torture. All they can think to do is call for a prohibition on criticism of that torture. They don't ask whether the bombings of schools in Vietnam are just. What they ask is for one not to say it from a painting, and for the American flags not to be shown on the wings of the planes. I have no idea what the formal value of these pieces is. The only thing I ask of art is for it to help me say what I think as clearly as possible, to invent conceptual and critical symbols that allow me to condemn the savagery of the West as effectively as possible. It is possible that someone might one day show me that that isn't art. I wouldn't have any problem with that. I wouldn't change direction. I'd just change the name. I'd cross out art and call it politics, corrosive criticism, whatever. This is Leon Ferrari, Argentinian artist in 1965. Antonio Berni, a very, I would say, artist that is very representative of our very diverse movements in art history, was not known as an artist who had any work of political content. But a few years ago, we found these drawings that again were condemning the same political circumstances and also condemning and denouncing the torture and violence throughout the Latin American dictatorships that flourished in the 1970s with different works. Luis Passos, an Argentinian artist who is very dear to our museum, who did a series of photo performances with his students at the University of La Plata, and who saw that his students, all of his students, were disappeared during the military dictatorship. This is one of the exhibitions that we produced in 1922 when the museum started to again continue its exhibition program after the pandemic, and we dedicated the ground floor galleries of the museum's collections to reflect on the violence that had been flourishing during the times of the pandemic, with different works that were either commissioned or on loan or from the collections, signaling different problematics in Argentina during that time. In this program as well, we invited for this program a Colombian artist, Delcy Morelos, who created a massive installation in the basement galleries of the museum. She created this very beautiful structure, minimalist structure with fertile earth, and it had cinnamon and coffee, and it was this incredible aroma. But this place was a place of trying to connect with Mother Earth, with where do we come from, and also where do we go back to, and also to think not only of the condition of fertility in nature that is provided by the earth and its importance, but also of thinking of the violence that had occurred in her, and that occurs still in her native country, Colombia, and of the mass graveyards that have existed during the past 60 years of violence in the countryside. 2025 has been a year dedicated to the relationship between theater and art at the museum. And within those, we dedicated an exhibition to a theater collective, El Periférico de Objetos, who created very radical theater performances during the 90s, criticizing what had happened. It was an afterthought after the dictatorship, trying to think, what is it that cannot happen again? What is it that history cannot allow once more? And very recently, these are very recent works of Leila Schopp, a fantastic painter from Argentina, who until very recently would work on abstraction and architecture as a subject matter. And only in 2024, 2 years ago, the human figure started to appear in her sites, in her spaces that are very unsettling. We don't know if these figures are, getting up, trying to get up, or if they're falling down. And there is this uncertainty as to where do we stand before the present. So art, I like to think that all of these artists help us understand the power of art, in the pathway or in the quest to understand our past and also our present. How do we position ourselves in the front of what we are living and going through today? And in order to understand the past and our present, we must understand ourselves. And different artists allow for that moment of deep introspection, as is the case of Eduardo Basualdo, who created a fantastic exhibition at the museum with some 60 drawings in which he would conceive of the mind of the human being as a home, and also as a possibility to see what is it that we are able to see, how much do we see, in which proportion, how do we understand ourselves, where do we position that sight, how do we observe, what is it that we carry with us as we observe, which are those histories. Eduardo created an exhibition with these drawings that would then open up to a big, enormous installation where these figures would appear in this sea of, let's say, bodies or circumstances. So a very dramatic exhibition for which the artist was conceiving as if this profound black seas or black arena would be probably the extension of our own mind or our own mindset or the state in which we find ourselves. Some artists looking towards spirituality and how do we position ourselves in this world, such as Linda Matalon from Brooklyn, from whom we presented an exhibition in our galleries, and she had been working throughout 2 pandemics, the AIDS pandemic in the early 90s in New York, where she works with these very beautiful wax on paper drawings, and also, well, she has never stopped working, and she has this incredible body of work, but the very powerful works of the wax drawings started at that time during the AIDS crisis, and throughout the COVID pandemic, they of course continued. So I thought it was natural to bring Linda as someone who is reflecting on that pain, on that position in the world. How do we find solace in the face of such circumstances and tragedies? Also, drawing as a way of finding oneself. La Chola Poblete is a young artist from Argentina, from the West in Mendoza, and she has these beautiful abstract drawings called the Exercises of Weeping. And these drawings, I later found out I became obsessed because they were so incredibly beautiful and abstract. And then I got to know, when I finally found the drawings in the live I had seen reproductions of, and La Chola told me that actually these drawings had been extremely important for her at a moment where she was deciding on her gender identity and her process of transitioning, and that these abstract drawings in a way were the moment where she was debating with herself and finding her own path in life. So the way in which abstract art and abstraction in itself and art and drawing allows oneself to accompany every human decision. Valentina Quintero, another artist who's from the same province of Mendoza, also very much involved in gender politics, but from the standpoint of painting in this case. And Valentina is also a transgender artist. In none of the 2 cases we would put this explicitly on the labels or in the wall text. Proudly, in equitable terms, were presented at the museum in all their force, and Valentina created an incredible exhibition in only 40 days with extraordinary paintings. The environment also as an issue of art. How can we understand better where we are, how do we position ourselves in the face of or in regards to the environment? And you have seen in a few slides already Nicolás García Uriburu, who was a pioneering artist, an activist, green activist from the 1960s in Argentina. We are dedicating an exhibition to the subject this year, which is our 70th anniversary. One of the exhibitions is called Nature Architect, and it will delve on different artists from Argentina and Brazil and Zimbabwe that are working on the conceptualization of nature as a witness, as a monument, and also as I would like to think of nature as an artist in and of herself as well, trying to understand how we can think of the relationship between humanity and nature in different terms. How can we create further consciousness of the importance of respecting our environment, and also how to occupy it from the realms of the imagination with an imaginative attitude, but also denouncing what the pains, let's say, of nature. In this case, Felix Shumba from Zimbabwe is a very young artist from Zimbabwe, will create a very important mural for the museum, and the charcoal he brings is a charcoal that he creates from forests from around his hometown, and he is putting, let's say, honoring but also denouncing the crisis around the forests in his native Zimbabwe. And of course the extractivist politics and how the acts of mining and other economic processes in the west of Argentina are affecting the different ecosystems. It will be part of the exhibition as well. Something that is very important to us is the understanding of art in its research capacity, let's say, how artists are specialists or masters in being able to exert, to develop a research capacity that I'm not sure other realms of knowledge and human action develop, which is that capacity to investigate in the most varied realms of knowledge to produce the work. So, for example, Tomás Saraceno, an Argentinian artist living in Berlin, he proposed to work for us to work with 7,000 spiders of the social species called Paravixia bistriata. And these spiders specifically are social, which means that they help each other to sleep, they create cocoons, they help each other to feed themselves, they create their transport lines, and they are a collaborative society. We were able to work with them because of their social capacity, and we brought them to the museum, where we had to adapt our hours of work, because we had to work during the night, because they work during the night, and they wake up around 8 p.m. and start weaving. And so we had biologists and scientists taking care of the spiders and making sure that they were fed properly. And this was what happened at 2 a.m., for example, at the museum. There was an enormous activity going on in the galleries. In order to prepare the galleries, we sealed them because we didn't want, the spiders to then colonize the museum and our conservatives to freak out. So really we did our best, and we had to put these suits in order to go into the space, and it was wonderful to go to the museum at 3 a.m. and to see that spectacle. It was so wonderful that one day, it was in December, I proposed my team, it would be great if in January, instead of opening the museum during the day, we open the museum during the night. And it was the first time that my staff said, no. Yes. And this is, just for you to see the scope, it was a 400 square meter gallery space, created by the 7,000 Parabixia bistriata spiders in collaboration with Tomás Saraceno, who lit and sort of directed with different fans. He sort of tried to direct a bit the aesthetics of their work. Incredibly beautiful. It was going to stay for 3 months, and we left it for a year because we couldn't take it down. Yes. Working around nature and artists that are so close to scientists. Julien Charrière from France is one of them, and we are going to have an exhibition. We're going to have nature architect on the ground floor this year, and in the basement galleries where you saw the Elsie Morelos, we will have an exhibition called The Ocean Within, looking at the depths of the ocean, but also the depths, the human depths. What is it that is in our deep souls, deep in our minds? Who are we? Where do we come from? What is it that we know of ourselves? What is everything that we don't know of ourselves, as is the case of the ocean? So different artists bringing those questions to the foreground from Argentina and from different countries in the world. So I hope you come and visit, because it's going to be very beautiful. The section on democratic development, I know I'm running, I should be going faster. I will try. Democracy is a big issue in this country and all over the world. Fortunately, fortunately, we live in democracies in the United States and in Argentina, and we have to take care of it. And we need to speak about it. I believe very strongly that education is a very strong asset, a very strong force that may protect democracy. And we at the museum created a program in 2024, just when President Milei was elected, entitled Art is Education, for the entire year. This program included the new hanging of the collection galleries, which this is a detail. And you will see in these slides that there are certain QRs. What we were thinking is that we had a deep need to make visible an enormous amount of work made by our collections team that had digitalized not only all of the collections, but also the history, the entire 70-year history of the museum's archives and the exhibitions. All the history of exhibitions was now available to the public, but nobody goes into the website to look for specifically that, so we want to make it very, very visible. So we thought that if we reconceptualized what a work of art of the collection means, perhaps people would, our spectators would be very much willing to go into these and visit our archives. So we conceptualized each work as a portal. If we think that each work in the collection is not only a fantastic work of art, but also a portal, that through the QRs that we have at hand today, we are able to access the history of an exhibition that took place in this 70-year history at this museum, and throughout that exhibition to get to know of how that work came to the museum or was put in context with our artists 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 years ago or yesterday, with which artist that artist, who were his peers, what were the conversations, what were the texts, who wrote about it, all of that information. If we think that a work of art is a portal that can give you access to that amount of knowledge and research, then I like to think that Museo Moderno offers a PhD program for free in Argentinian art history, at your own pace as you visit the galleries, the amount of times that you wish to visit. So, if you want to do a PhD in Argentinian art, you come to Museo Moderno in Buenos Aires. For that year, Art is Education, we created different exhibitions around the museum on this theme. One of them was called Endless Learning and portrayed artists from the 50s to today that engage in pedagogical actions, that designed pedagogical strategies, and that are teachers of artists or teachers of schools. And so artists from all of the last decades brought together in ways so as to put the education, the act of education in the museum, in the galleries. So not as education program, but as a subject matter of our museum, with different strategies by different artists. One of those collectives was the secondary school Liliana Maresca, which is a secondary school entirely taught by artists. All of the artists in the all of the teachers in the secondary school are leading artists in Argentina. So the secondary school is one of the best schools in the country, and the artists, the students who graduate, they are now in the world exhibiting. Education as such is important, very important. The schools programs, the schools come to the museum goes to the schools. We have teacher training programs. We trained 22,000 teachers during 2022. I can speak more about that. The family programs for the youth, for the elderly, dancing courses, works on going out into ecology, working with green schools and such. So a vast program within what I think of as education is the publications programs with more than 70 books published throughout the last decades. They're all bilingual, and I brought a few if you want to then browse. As I mentioned in the introduction, art is a mirror of freedom of expression. This is a museum that likes to take a stance. When Milei, the president, was cutting on the budget for the university, the public university in Argentina, we decided to call this program Art is Education. And when Milei attacked the LGBTQ communities worldwide in Davos, we posted a position of the museum establishing the value of gender equity as very, very crucial to our institution, structural to our institution. We had decided to name our yearly program 2025 Artist Theater, and very soon Milei was cutting funds to the theater. So the museum became the space in which to let's say, bring together the artistic community of theater, and we were able to showcase 10 exhibitions, as I mentioned before, on the relationship between art and theater. It was very vital. It brought historical figures such as Victor Garcia, who was totally not visible in Argentinian art history, but was very recognized in Brazil and in France because he had been in exile. And we honored more prominent figures of more elderly age that we wanted them to have the proper recognition during the lifetime, and also younger practitioners such as Maricel Alvarez here on the screen. In this stance of speaking out, we are now curating an exhibition that will take place during the Venice Biennale in Venice of different artists denouncing the horrors of dictatorship and the violence that has been occurring since in our region of the world, with different works from different artists denouncing violence is still occurring today. Something very important is, thinking of democracy, the importance of art as healing. Art has the effect to heal, and we believe very strongly in this. And here are some images of Nicanor Arauz, an artist who has gone through very deep hurting and who is able to create the most amazing sculptures and installations that are of extreme vitality, whilst he denounces also the different horrors of violence and femicides in Latin America specifically. Onomeke from Nigeria, but also from the United States. She says she was born on both sides of the Atlantic. She is an artist that looks positively to the future, thinking of the importance of projecting a prosperous Africa in the face of the future. And so she is an artist who works in the digital realm, is very much someone who thinks of AI in a positive mode as a force that may be able to construct a better future, or as a tool to be able to construct a better future. And I very strongly recommend that you study her work closely. She has a fantastic website, and her films, poetry, radio programs, plays are just otherworldly. Selina Ezeiza, they are all artists that were given the means. As a museum, we invest, and we like to produce and help artists produce their work for the exhibitions. This is Selina Ezeiza, a 32-year-old artist who we gave the chance to produce a large-scale exhibition, entirely a soft exhibition where the walls were covered entirely. She actually sewed the entire space. This is different teams, a registrar, head of exhibitions. We were all sewing in the gallery spaces, creating a fantastic environment where so many children and just the spectators could delve and relax. Access is crucial in our construction of what we think of equity and democracy, and accessibility is very key to our institution. We are very obsessed with the idea to depathologize the idea of disability, and I like to think that we all are peoples with disabilities. So when we think in this way, suddenly we are all different peoples with different conditions. And of course, there are special needs which we address very actively. And here, Amparo, who is with glasses, she is a coordinator of the accessibility program. So this is very important because for us, it's important that those coordinating and working on the programs are people that know what they're talking about very specifically. So very proud, and we've got quite a bit of recognition of the accessibility programs that have a huge turnout. So this is really, really important for us, that every time more persons feel comfortable coming through the door and feel very much welcomed at the museum. Joanna Paulik is a Polish artist who will be exhibiting this year at the museum. We are very big fans of her and are very much looking forward to her performances at the museum. Economic development is key for us. We are a big team. I think it's important to give work to people in Argentina, to museum professionals, and we are a team of professionals where we are curatorial, exhibitions, publications, educators, communicators, registrars, conservators, collections management, security guards, development department, administrative staff. We have a wonderful team of maintenance and hygiene, and it's just like the best possible team one can dream of. It's important in a country like Argentina to be able to give professional opportunities in an area of expertise that is so specific, such as a museum is, and museum culture. So we try to do an excellent job, and I like to think that excellence in our practice protects us. So this is who we are. We like to think that we are a force that affects, hopefully the planet. And in this way, I'm very happy to be here. So we work at the museum with a collection of 8,000 works, and we do all these exhibitions. But we work in a neighborhood, and to this neighborhood, some 15 galleries, art galleries, have come closer to the museum during the last decade. So we start to be an art neighborhood. And within that, we have developed different initiatives that includes a residency home that we are very proud of. And to this residency come professionals and artists from all over the country. And we work, as I said, with teachers from 22,000 teachers from all over the country. So we are in touch with all the artistic communities all over the country, and we try to be in contact with the world, so very much through the organization CIMAM that I was in the board of during the past few years. But we're looking at sustainability, Culture for the Planet Alliance, and we have an agreement with Oxford universities to provide professional opportunities in the form of internships. We work in a system. So we work with the government, with sponsors, with education, with collections, with the health ministries of culture. I like to think this is very, very important, that this is sort of some numbers, but I like to think this slide is very important to me, because this is how we like to work. We are a public institution, and as a public institution, we like to think that everything we do has to have an effect in our society. We cannot do absolutely everything we do has to translate to how it affects our public, or how it affects the artistic ecosystem, how it will benefit the galleries, the artistic spaces, the emerging art spaces, the other museums in the city, how it might, what is it that we can do for the Argentinian ecosystem to be stronger. And so here in this slide, you see of the two images, here on my right is the Ministry of Culture at the time. Over there in front is, with a microphone, is the director of another leading institution, museum in Buenos Aires. At the back of the table, the president of another museum in Buenos Aires, and many here are important collectors, press, journalists, directors of galleries, senior curators, all the community together thinking, what is it that we can do better? In this case, we were preparing for the conference, for the Congress organized by CIMAM, this Congress of this Association of Museum Professionals. But this is what we're doing also this year as we approach the 70th anniversary. We are working with the different galleries, the different museums. How can the 70th anniversary of this public museum in Argentina serve them? What is it that we can do as a public agency so that whatever we do at the museum impacts them positively? So we have this public consciousness very, very clear in what we do, and we are strategizing all the time to see how is it that we can actually impulse, draw visitors or different programs and actions to the different museums in the city or in the country. How do we involve artists in different parts and corners of Argentina? How we bring them to the museum? We created a website on Argentinian contemporary art with a glossary, and we asked artists, institutions, archives, libraries, residencies, universities to participate. Everybody was invited. This was a non-curated, non-filtered platform. We only curated the 120 words of the glossary. And in 3 months, 750 Argentinian artists uploaded through a Google form their image, their statement, their portfolio, their websites, everybody self-tagged, to 5 concepts in the glossary so as to be tracked through those keywords. And in this way, the museum is providing a platform of research for Argentinian art for you, for everybody around the world who might be interested in this incredible, or not incredible, so powerful artistic community that exists for 150 years. This was the presence of the 250 museum directors and senior museum professionals from 51 countries who came to Buenos Aires in November 2023. We visited 65 spaces through 17 customized tours on different themes that we wanted each museum director to be able to follow their own interests, not to be imposed on different visits, but to go to the visits of places that were that they could have a potential genuine interest. And this is the residency home where Tina stayed and where we would like to welcome everyone, ideally. So I'm very grateful to Gerardo Ascuy from the Studio Ascuy and Joan Catalosi's studio, who did the work of refurbishing, and Joan did the interior design of the residency, with today residents from all over Argentina coming from 2 to 4 weeks to do research or their projects or whatever they need. We try to have it open and running all the time. So with this, I know I probably went over time, but this is, thank you very much. Thank you. It was too long, no? So we can put another slide. I hope it was not too long.
It was not too long.
Okay.
Well, I want to begin with a very heartfelt thank you, because the talk was extraordinarily moving and inspiring, and I think I speak for the whole audience that your vision and the depth of ambition at the museum was incredibly evident. Okay. So for you to come and share it with us here and give us a feeling, especially those of us who haven't been as lucky as I am, was just a huge gift.
Thank you.
I'm speaking for all of us, yes. What a gift. And I guess that there are probably questions in the audience, so I'm just going to ask you a couple.
Okay.
And they're based on my experience, listening to you now and taking in what you had to say, some of which I didn't know, and reflecting back on my time in Buenos Aires. And one of the things I thought I'd begin with was that when I was in Buenos Aires and I was meeting artists and talking to them and meeting your staff and talking to you, one of the feelings I came away with from being a North American was that Buenos Aires was much less, and the art system there, the art world, the art ecosystem, was much less dominated by a marketplace. That there were fewer galleries, there were fewer collectors, there were fewer artists who were part of galleries, and all of that was less dominant. And I wondered if you would agree, and then I also wondered what effect you think that has. I could see some of the effect on the artist, but I wondered what effect you think that has on the museum.
Oh, that's a very good question. I'm used to having the mic here, so what effects does that have on the museum? Well, it puts us in a place of further responsibility, because it is true that we don't yet have the market that our art and artists deserve. I think that is a big debt of the Argentinian economy towards our art and artists. And I'm I am optimistic. I think it will develop. I think work such as the one that we do at the Museo helps affirm the importance of this enormous artistic community. And I think we advocate for this internationally, and in that international recognition, there is a force that comes from the exterior that, allows for the local collectors to understand the value of what is at stake. And so I think that it will become every day stronger. I'm optimistic in that sense. But in the meantime, because there are many artists who should be in a better place in terms of their own economies, we feel a huge responsibility, and we are very, very attentive to the needs of artists, and and what is it that we do, who do we present? We look, once that we've chosen the artists for an exhibition, we look, of course, at gender and where do they come from, which provinces do they come from, and also what galleries are they associated with. We make sure that, if there's, 3-4 artists from one gallery and one artist from another, we say, look, no, perhaps we should present this artist in a later show, and to try to make sure that there is sort of a balance of how the museum is responding to the gallery ecosystem as well. And because the galleries, the directors of the galleries, they also are very important players that put a lot at stake, and it's a big effort to be a gallery director in Argentina. So we want to protect them, and we want to empower them, and we want to support them. They are very important players, and we want to, motivate young professionals to hopefully go into the gallery world and create their own galleries. So it is very important. For the 70th anniversary, we called. It was very beautiful. We had meetings like this. We invited the gallery directors to different breakfasts, and we asked them first, please don't open a show the week of the museum's anniversary. We want all of you and your artists here at the museum, and in return, let us, provide for communication of your shows all over the city according to different strategies of communication of the museum. So during the year, part of the strategy of communication of the anniversary is to foster visits of different publics to the different galleries in different parts of the city. So we try as best as we do. We are always imaginative, and we always welcome ideas. So if you have ideas, please let us know. Yes.
That was very clear there. It's alive with ideas. So I think the last question I'm going to ask, and then we can open it up, is when you were included in the book about the future of museums, the 28 dialogues, that was from now 6 years ago, 2020, at one point in that conversation, that printed conversation, you described your touch points for the museum as being a hospital and a school and an artist studio. And I feel like that was very, very evident in the talk, that I heard all of that and I saw all of that. But my deep impression from being at Museo Moderno was that fundamentally it's a home for artists. That if you had to choose, it would be a home, and that it has a deep sense of that. Not a institutional, of course it is one, but that the idea of being a respite and a home, all of the associations of home for artists primarily, was what I took away, and I wondered if you agree.
Well, I hope I would. I'm honored by your observation, and if that is the case, we do a good job, and so that is calming. but you never have to take that for granted. You have to work towards that every day. So yes, it is. We like to think of ourselves as a home for Argentinian artists. Yes, and I like to think that we have to be alive. And I think when I replied in that sense, in one of these conversations where you have a journalist that is a bit aggressive, wants you to put a line there, and I said, inspiration could come from a hospital, a school, or an artist studio. I think in the back of my mind, what I was meaning by that was that the model cannot come from the institution. It has to come from real life. And in order to make a place alive, you need to think of how it is relevant to other places where people come together to heal or to educate or to foster the imagination, and so that spark of being alive is what we want at the museum, and we really fight everything that has to do with being static, and if we do something well, it's always to turn it around again, not to say, oh, this is fine, to just, okay, we have to move and continue. So at one point at the beginning, when I entered the museum, I thought of a phrase that we put sometimes in our communication. It was called a museum as a living organism, like a museum that is alive. And if the museum lies somewhere between all of these spaces, then I think if we are alive, we are fine. And then the rest is, it's a matter of, you might like more this, or matter of taste, or engagement, or provocation, and what inspires you more. But we try to offer a very diverse platform, hopefully to inspire all the children that come through the door. And I always say, if when I used to be an independent curator, I would say, if in my small exhibition, one visitor of that exhibition suddenly, gets the bug of art and understands that art can, build another world for your life, then I did my job. Now, for the museum, I cannot say that because I think I have to be more ambitious. But yes, so I really value a lot the work of our educators at the museum, because they do this incredible work of bonding the visitors, the students, with the works and the art. And so I'm sure that, the different children that come through the door, they take away something, that something has to, from all of what they see, something has to nurture the soul, I hope. And we work for that. Yeah. We'll see. Yes.
Beautiful. Do folks in the audience have questions? Yeah.
Thank you so much for that incredible talk. I'm looking forward to the rest of your programming this week. I was wondering if you could just speak in a bit more detail about what it looks like in a practical sense to center the artist, to collaborate with the artist. How does that inform curatorial choices? How does that inform things like labels and interpretation? As a modern museum, you're working with living artists, and so what does that look like on sort of a day-to-day basis?
Good question. Well, it is a challenging question because I don't know how can it be otherwise, in the sense that curatorially, in the team there is usually one or two curators who are artists at the museum. So to start with, the presence of the artists in the team, not only curatorial team, but the different teams of the institution is an important presence. And it's a bit funny, but when someone in the team who is an artist speaks, I sort of pay very much attention. And every exhibition that we do, I will give you a very specific example, perhaps that is easier. For the show in Venice that we are about to present, Augusto Maurandi, who's the director of Spazio Punch in Venice, he gave me a call and he said, Victoria, I want Museo Moderno to curate the space I have in Venice and I would like the show, he was very specific, I would love Museo Moderno to curate a show on the Argentinian dictatorship for my space. And we were organizing the 70th anniversary, 10 exhibitions, Argentina, all it's all complicated and challenging. I was like, and I told Augusto, I cannot deliver what you wish with a broken heart because I'm not a specialist in the dictatorship in Argentina. I'm not, a sociology specialist, nor is anyone in my team. And I cannot put the Museo at the service of something so important if we are not specialists in the subject. Okay. And then he calls 2 weeks later. He says, Victoria, the Canadians want to hire the space and will pay me very well, and the Koreans want to hire the space and they will pay me very well. But I don't want to give them the space. I want you to take it over. I'm like, oh my God. So I said, okay, give me 48 hours. And I took it more seriously. I understood the importance of what he was saying. And I realized, I came back to him, I said, look, the only way I can think that this can happen is if living artists from Argentina are participating in the exhibition. And if we do a show and all the effort that it implies to do a show in Venice with, in euros and everything that is implicated by an international exhibition overseas, it has to impact the lives of at least 4 or 5 artists who are mid-generation, and it has to impact on the recognition of more elderly artists and in the memory of artists that we strongly believe in that have passed away. And I can only do this show if the living artists are present, and if the show at the end of the day will provide the recognition that certain artists need. And I said, I am specifically thinking of Nicanor Arauz, who I showed you with the figures and the chains in neon, who had done that incredible show during the pandemic, and because nobody traveled, the international art world didn't see it. And it was one of the most incredible exhibitions, and an artist speaking from, he doesn't say it, but I can say it, that he speaks from an experience of pain. So I thought, if I can give Nicanor this platform of visibility, then we as a museum will have done something very, very important for Argentinian art, not only for Nicanor Arauz. And the same for Ana Gallardo, who's an incredible activist, who has worked so much with the elderly people and with women, with a society of women, just women from all over the world. And she has also some monumental, extraordinary drawings that I feel nobody has seen. So, if Anna's drawing is in the show, then this makes sense. And Eduardo Basualdo with the drawings of the mind and the heads and the big, dramatic black installation. It's like this, it has to have some of this. And in that sense, when Augusto said, okay, but I was very specific. I said, we can do it. I'm happy to curate with my team. these artists are in the show. You decide if you want to accept, because it's your space, or not. And he said, okay, let's go forward. And so what we did, I thought, was not to try to bring out of the blue in 6 months, which we are doing that, but not to try to bring out of the blue a show that is like capricious. So most of the work in this show is work that we have researched at the museum, worked through over the years. Many of those presences are presences that took part of different exhibitions, and that therefore we very naturally can present, knowing that what the depth of the weight that these works have. It's a small show, but the weight of each work that is going to be relevant. And I think the message to the world, we're not branding it as a show of Argentinian artists. It's called Darkness Visible, the Long Shadow of Dictatorship, because it wants to bring a reflection on our experience of dictatorship, but beyond, and how violence continues and has continued its presence in our lives since, and of course this doesn't start with a dictatorship, but including gender inequity. So one of the artists in the show is Flavia Darin, that you could think she doesn't relate specifically to the dictatorship, but she relates to the violence on women in broader societies, not meaning physical violence, but psychological violence. So I think it is an opportunity to think in those terms. I'm not sure if I'm replying to your question, but is what I can say, that that we have to impact the lives of artists in a very concrete way. It cannot be abstract. It cannot be because we desire this work. It has to have an impact on those who create and work in Argentina.
I think that is the right moment to end on. So I want to thank you again, Victoria, for coming here and your incredible talk.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Victoria will be here for the rest of the week, so say hi to her.